I'm Dave Mecklenburg from TigerSharkTrading.com. Before we begin, I want to remind you there's a high degree of risk in trading. If you've been trading for more than one day, you know that you can and will lose money trading. Only trade with money you can afford to lose. Our presenter today is a professional trader and system developer. He's the author of the book, Building Winning Algorithmic Trading Systems. You can find him at kjtradingsystems.com. Please welcome Kevin Davey.
All right. Thanks, Dave. And glad to be here. Thanks for having me on again. And thanks to everybody who taken a little bit out of their day or evening to listen to me today. And today I'm going to talk about some strategy creation mistakes that can really drain your account and how to fix them. So with that, let's get started. So first of all, again, thanks to Tiger Shark Trading for sponsoring today's event. And you know, you should go visit their website for lots of good info. So today I'm going to first, for those of you who don't know me, I know most of you probably do, but just going to go over a brief bio of my background, and then I'm going to launch into mistakes strategy developers make. Now I'm going to focus more on people who make mechanical rule-based systems, but if you're a discretionary trader, a lot of this could also apply to you, because it's things that if you're doing any kind of testing and evaluation of a strategy, it's pitfalls that can happen to everybody. And then what we'll do at the end is we'll do questions and answers then. So if you have questions, you feel free to type them in as we go along, but I probably won't answer them till the very end. So first, you know, Dave had a short disclaimer. Here's a little bit longer one. You know, past performance is not indicative of future results, and you'll treat everything you see here today as hypothetical, and then you'll be pretty good. So, you know, I'm a full-time trader. Everything else is part-time. So, for me, everything revolves around my own trading first, and so I make sure I do that first. And I've been trading about 25 years or so, and 3 years in a row I finished either in first or second place in a famous worldwide futures trading contest. Each of those years I had over 100% return. So I have some good validated, you know, third-party verified performance out there of my trading history. If you've ever read the book, The Universal Principles of Successful Trading, first of all, if you haven't read it, it's a really good book. So I suggest you do it. And written by Brett Penfold. And I was profiled in there along with a bunch of other really good traders as a market master. So you might want to check that out. You probably have seen some of my articles in Modern Trader magazine, which used to be Futures magazine. And I've written on some pretty neat different topics: equity curve trading, beware of back tests, that kind of thing. And then if you go to some trading forums, futures.io, which used to be Big Mike Trading, or TradeStation, their help forum, you'll see, if you see somebody named Kevin K-Dog, that is me. So you know, feel free to send me some questions. Okay, so I'm also the author of Trader Planet's 2014 book of the Trading Book of the Year, Building Winning Algorithmic Trading Systems. And there's some people who I really look up to, Van Tharp, Andrea Unger, Michael Cook, and they've read the book and gave some good feedback on it. So you know, if you're into system trading and you know a little bit, it's not a beginner's book, but might be worth looking at. And after the book came out, I created a workshop that I teach. It's called the Strategy Factory Workshop, that kind of lays out a step-by-step process for developing trading strategies. And it's what I use pretty much every day to develop new trading strategies. But you know, that's what I do now. My first 10 years or so, I probably did everything the wrong way. I mean, it was just amazing how many ways I figured out how to screw up and lose money. And but I learned from that, you know, and that led to a lot of in-depth research that I decided to do. And I took that and figured out what winning traders were doing and put it with my own personality and things that I like doing, you know, ways I liked analyzing the markets and testing and everything, and that kind of led to where I am today. And, you know, hopefully for most of you out there, you know, you don't go through so many years of losing, but if you do, you got to step back and think about what you're doing and try to make some changes. And that's certainly what I did, and I was able to kind of overcome it. One big breakthrough I had was I realized I was just kind of bebopping around from method to method, from different styles of trading, different rules one day versus the next. You know, I wasn't consistent at all, really, in my trading. You know, this week I would do scale trading, do that for a while, and then, you know, hop in with some discretionary trades and maybe try some kind of half-baked system idea I came up with. And for me, the big breakthrough was when I stopped doing those kind of things by creating what I consider a pretty solid development process. You know, and that's what I teach to everybody, but I'm going to show you the basics of it today and go over some of those mistakes that I've used to do and how I got through them. So this is my process. It takes you from goals and objectives, you know, through a trading idea, through some testing, through some simulation, position sizing, you know, before you end up at the bottom at real money trading. Now, most of these steps are, you can think of them as like hurdles, where you've got to jump over them, or your strategy has to jump over them. You know, there's a certain criteria I go by at every step, and if it doesn't make it, the strategy fails, and then I don't pursue it anymore. This keeps me from doing some of the mistakes I'll talk about later, things like over-optimizing. You know, I don't put too much time into an idea unless I can see it's going to work and it starts meeting some of this the criteria I have. So these are my steps that I normally take. And like I said, today I'm going to highlight 6 different mistakes you can make along the way. And that's where all the mistakes show up. So with that, I'm just going to launch into it. Mistake number 1, not having a process in the first place. You know, this is how most people go into trading. You know, they look at a chart, maybe they read something on an internet forum, and say, oh, hey, that's how I'm going to trade. I'm going to look for outside bars. I'm going to look for inside bars. And they've never evaluated the idea. They've never really fleshed it out. They've never tested it. They just wing it. You know, they just kind of go and start doing it. They jump into it. You know, is that a good way to go? Well, you know, think about your own life and things you've done, success-wise, failure-wise, in your own career, in your relationships and everything. Did you have a plan for those things? You know, did you decide to be, let's say, a dentist? Did you just decide one day to open up an office and buy some dental equipment? Or did you have a plan to do good in school, a plan to go to dental school, a plan then to start your own business? That's probably what you did. Most of your successes are probably the result of a planned process, right? Probably not random chance. You know, maybe you were the dentist who just decided to open up a dental office, and I hope nobody catches you because you're unlicensed. But anyways, you got to have a plan. You got to have a process. And the people who don't have a process in trading usually, not always, but usually are the ones who fail. If you have a plan, it's no guarantee you're going to succeed, but you're giving yourself a much better chance, in my opinion, because then There's a lot of stuff you have to think about as part of this process. What kind of style are you going to trade? How are you going to evaluate systems? When are you going to start systems? When are you going to stop systems? Where are you going to get your capital from? You have to think about all that beforehand. You just don't plop $10,000 or $20,000 into an account, and as soon as that account's ready to trade, start trading, right? Hopefully not. I mean, I know some people do, but most of those people end up losing. So you really need a process. And that's mistake number one, and also how to fix mistake number one. Mistake number one is not having a process, and the fix is create a process. Build a process. And you might say, well, how do I do that? Well, you find somebody, a book, a workshop, whatever, find somebody who's done that, and then you go and do it. Okay, so that's pretty simple. Now, mistake number two, trading idea. A lot of people think they have to reinvent the wheel, that they have to come up with a whole theory on how the markets work in order to succeed. That you don't. You don't need to be super creative. You don't really need a whole lot of screen experience, although it does help. I'm not saying it doesn't help, but as a friend of mine last week was telling me, the way he approaches it is he builds on the work of others. He stands on their shoulders to build what he's building, right? So he'll take things that are out there existing. Now, he won't take them as is and just go and trade them. He'll take them, he'll modify them, he'll evaluate them. I do the same thing. A lot of my ideas came from somewhere else. I can't tell you how many book ideas that I've come up with over the years. A lot of times it's not even the idea that works, it's the opposite idea, because a lot of what's written in books just doesn't work anymore. The other part is that becomes the start of ideas. So somebody talks in a book about idea X, well, that'll be the start of where I go, and then I'll go from there. And the other big thing, your idea doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be 10 rules with 10 variables and, 20 filters. And in fact, what I found is the more stuff you put in, the better your backtest will look, right? Because you're just fitting it to all this, the rules. You're fitting the rules to the data, or you're fitting the data to the rules, however you want to look at it. But going forward, real time, those usually don't work. The more complicated ideas don't work. So this is mistake number two. People think either they can't create ideas, or that they need to come up with their own ideas, or that their ideas need to be super complicated. And I'm here to tell you that none of those three things needs to be true. It's like I said, what I do, I just grab ideas from everywhere. I use my experience sometimes. I've never been the type of trader to stare at a screen for hours on end, so I can't really do that too much. But some people who are used to that might pick up things. You might see, hey, every time I see an inside bar, a reversal happens, or something like that. You could use machine building tools. I'd be a little careful in that because that's really easy to over-optimize. And I'm always looking for new ideas. Always. I mean, I have a list, probably about 60 or 70 ideas at this point, and I keep adding all the time. As quickly as I test ideas, I add new ones. So for you in your trading, how to fix this mistake of ideas, too complicated, or not being able to come up with ideas. Just be willing to test anything and keep it simple. It's, that's pretty easy. And if you can do that and just write down ideas as you get them, you're going to find yourself in pretty good shape. Okay, so mistake number 3. This happens during the testing process. You want to test everything you try out, because otherwise, how are you not going to know if it works? Now some people say, well, hey, that just tells you it worked in the past. Absolutely true. But would you rather trade something that you know worked in the past or something that you know didn't work in the past, or something you didn't know what it did in the past? If you had to choose one, what would it be? Most people would choose something that worked in the past. I mean, it makes sense, right? You're saying, hey, I think that's going to keep working going forward. No guarantee, obviously, but I think your best bet is to find something that's worked in the past and you assume it's going to keep working. Certainly that's better to me than not knowing at all, because then you're just guessing, and really you're just gambling. And if you're going to do that, all the help in the world's not really going to help you. So, one mistake people make, probably everybody's made it, probably everybody makes it. I fall victim to it still, probably once in a while, not as much as I used to, but it's over-optimizing. People just try to build a backtest that looks terrific, and then they make the assumption that it's going to continue forward. And you know what, folks? It almost never happens that way. It's almost a reverse correlation. The better you make the backtest, almost always the worse you make the real-time performance. And it's really hard to get your head around that and understand that and actually believe it. But here's what most people do, right? Take all their data, take all their parameters, all their ranges, and you throw them in your backtest software. Hey, that's the way the backtest software is set up. It makes it really easy to optimize something. A lot of people probably never even heard of optimizing until they go and run their trading platform and they find out, wow, is this easy? I can run millions of cases. I can let this run all weekend. I can use genetic optimization. I can use all this kind of stuff. I can do millions of iterations with hundreds of variables. And then it'll tell me what's best. And then I start trading it. What could be better, right? That's what most people think. That's how most people test. And if you're saying, well, I'd never do that, well, my hat's off to you, because that is a big mistake most people make. But, that's an extreme, people who run systems all weekend kind of thing. But, maybe in your own testing, you're still doing too many iterations with too many rules. So you could still be over-optimizing. Still doing this just on a lower scale. Well, I'm here to say this is wrong. This is not the best way to do it. Can you succeed with it? Probably once in a while with some strategies you probably could. But by and large, if you go this route, you're going to be in trouble. Almost guaranteed. I know every time I used to try it, because I used to think this was the way to do it, never worked. A lot of it's due to what I call the backtest curse. And I wrote an article back last year in Modern Trader magazine. It's called Don't Build a Better Backtest. So if you go to futuresmag.com, search the archives, you should be able to find this. And actually I put the address down at the bottom, so you can just type it in there. And it will kind of walk you through what most people do and why you shouldn't do it. But people get in this mindset that by optimizing, they're making things better because they're creating a better backtest. And if you leave with nothing else today, just remember the more you back test, the worse off you're going to be. Because every time you rerun a back test, you're just, you're optimizing and you're doing some bad things just a little bit more. So, how do you fix this? Simple. 1, limit the amount of optimization. 2, if you're using out-of-sample data, if you're doing walk-forward testing or out-of-sample testing, don't run it and run it again and run it again. I see people who do walk-forward and they'll finish it and look at the results and say, oh, I can go do better, and go back and fix it, add a rule, run it again, and then run it again and again. And they think because it's walk forward, it's still out of sample. Well, tell you what, you keep running tests over the same data, it's no longer out of sample. And you're going to get into trouble doing that. And finally, you just need to let go. You need to let go of the need to improve backtest results. You might care that a backtest looks great, and maybe you can fool some friends and colleagues and that kind of thing, but the market doesn't care. Do you really think the market is going to pay any credence to your backtest? No. The market's going to do what it's going to do. And if you've tricked yourself into thinking that the market's going to listen to what you have in the backtest and still perform like that, you're mistaken, big time. So don't feel you need to improve the backtest. That's the big thing. Okay, mistake number 4, knowing what's good and what's not good. And this kind of ties into the whole backtest thing, right? If you don't know what's good performance and what's not good performance, you're not going to know when to quit improving that backtest. You're not going to know if this trade is a good system to trade, right? If this strategy is a good system to trade. Here's an example. Are these good strategies? Huh? These are all walk forward. These are all out of sample results. Without knowing anything else, I'd say these are pretty good. They're not perfect, but that's good. You don't want something that's perfect. You want something that has drawdowns in it, which is really weird to say, and flat periods. You want flat periods. You don't want a perfect looking equity curve. Why? Because I can almost guarantee you it's not going to happen in real time. But any of these charts you see up here, that could happen in real time. Your performance could look like that. Now, it might be when you start trading it live, maybe this one doesn't keep going like this. Maybe it's something less. But it could still be a very profitable and risk-adjusted profitable strategy for you. So you've got to learn what's good and what's not. And part of that, the solution is you need goals and objectives. If you tell yourself you need 500% return a year with a 5% drawdown, you've probably got unrealistic goals, and that's just going to lead you down a bad path. So you got to have some. You got to know what's achievable. Is 100% a year with no drawdown or 10% drawdown year after year achievable? If you don't know the answer to that, you got to go find that out. Because if that's what you expect, and that's what you think you can get, and you do a little research and find out, wow, there's nobody doing that, then you need to change your goals and objectives, right? Because otherwise you're just setting yourself up for failure. The other part, you have to make sure the numbers you create, the back tests you create, the evaluations you do, translate to acceptable performance. What you don't want curve to look like this, and as soon as you start trading it, it goes like this. Or maybe this didn't have slippage and commissions, and when you add slippage and commissions, this strategy actually goes like this, downhill, right? So you got to make sure what you create is actually something that can be replicated in the real world, because there's a lot out there that isn't. Well, especially if you look at equity curves that don't have slippage and commission. People show those all the time, and they make a huge difference. Somebody the other day was just asking me about EMD, which is the mid-cap indice, and I was telling him I use $100 slippage round turn for that guy. Huge amount of slippage, but that's what that market requires. So something like feeder cattle, that's usually around $100 too. So if you assume even that your slippage is only going to be $25, chances are your strategy might actually be a loser that you think's a winning one. So you got to be real careful with that. So you really have to know what is good and not good. Goals and objectives is one way, and then having a process that you trust is another way. And ultimately, you want to do what the bottom line here says. Is your process improving your results? So whatever process you use, if you decide to follow what I do, or you decide what somebody else says, or you come up with something on your own, at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, is what I'm doing leading to real results that are acceptable? And if it's not, you got to change it, right? It sounds simple, but a lot of people don't want to change. They're fixated on it. I could give you story after story of people I've known for years who've been losing for years and who are still doing the same thing. One guy in particular, still working on the same strategy for 5 years now. Crazy. He's never made money with it, yet he won't let it die. And that happens a lot more often than you think. So, got to have goals and objectives, and at some point you got to have that feedback loop of checking your performance and making sure it actually fixes it improves your results. If it doesn't, do something else. All right, mistake number 5. You see, I have this pointing to a whole bunch of different places, and that's really all about knowing what metrics to choose. Some people get totally bogged down with these things. I've seen people who say, hey, my winning percentage is good, my expectancy is good, my profit factor is good, but I don't like the number of trades it's taken. Okay. You look at enough metrics on a performance report, take a performance report at a trade station. How many different metrics are there? I mean, there's probably a few hundred different measures, short trades, long trades, all trades, and then there's all these different coefficient of variation and profit factors and select profit factors, all this stuff. How do you even know what to choose and what not to choose? It's a good question. I mean, ultimately, they all can be important in different ways. Some people are fixated on winning percentage. Well, I personally find that useless, but maybe for what they're doing, there's a reason. But if you look for something that all the statistics are good, all the metrics are good, you're never going to get anywhere. You're just going to be disappointed, and then you're going to go back and change your test. You're going to look at an equity curve and say, ooh, I don't like where that max drawdown, I don't like the amount, so I'm going to add a filter. And then you add the filter and the drawdown goes away, or it's cut in half, and then you give it a thumbs up because you say, you know what, I defeated that metric, I made it twice as good as it was. But you can do that with all these things. You're rarely going to find any strategy that's so good. So what's the fix here? You got to find metrics that support how you develop, and then of course you validate it with real-time performance. So, it sounds simple, and you're probably like, oh yeah, well of course, that's just common sense. Well, really it's not, because I've seen people with 20 criteria, and I don't think they're necessarily any better than I am, and I basically have, for a lot of steps, I have one criteria, the net profit. And you might say, well, how can you only look at net profit? All these experts say you got to, net profit's the wrong thing to optimize for, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but look at that second point there. Validated through real money performance. So I can tell you the way I do it works for me. It works for a lot of the people I help. But depending what you're doing, maybe that won't work the best. Net profit and risk-adjusted return. That net profit divided by the drawdown, those are the two numbers that I really call home. Those are the ones that keep me grounded, the ones that I really look at. That's what you got to do. And just remember, there's people out there say you got to do it this way, you got to do it that way. I'm telling you one way to do it. I'm not saying I have the only right way. There is no right way. That's the weird thing about trading. It's not rocket science. Rocket science, you have these laws of physics, right? You have the laws of the universe. You have mathematical equations. You can predict where a rocket's going to go. That's how they landed on the moon, right? This is not rocket science. It's complicated, yes, like rocket science, but there is no absolute answer to any of this. And a lot of people think there has to be an answer. And especially technical people in engineering, in medicine, in accounting, and those type of, in IT that, are computer programmers, they think there's got to be a way to do this, to solve this problem and get the right answer. And honestly, there is no answer. There's certain best practices, of which I think I do at least some, hopefully, but there is no absolute answer. So if you keep that in mind, you're going to do a lot better. Okay, mistake number 6, and start thinking of questions if you haven't already put some in, because we're getting close to the end here, and I'll stay around for a while afterwards to go over some questions. Mistake number 6 is not knowing when to quit. And actually, somebody actually had a question, and it looks like Pete Bob had a question, not knowing when you quit. Most people don't think about this. Who wants to think about quitting a strategy when you're just starting out, right? You're not thinking about that. You're thinking about how much your account's going to grow, or how it's going to pay for this new car, or how you're going to be able to remodel your house, or how you're going to be able to go to a cocktail party with all your professional friends, and you can be able to brag about all the money you made trading futures or stocks or whatever, right? That's all you're thinking about. You're not thinking about what happens when things go wrong. And then you have no plan. And think about the rest of your life, like I was talking about earlier. How many times have you survived without a plan, right? People have a plan if their house catches on fire, because they have smoke detectors everywhere, right? And chances are, if you have kids, you've probably run fire drills with your kids so they know how to get out of the house, right? You have a plan. You don't just wing it. Oh, there's a fire. Oh, I don't know what to do. And you run around panic, right? That's what people do with trading. They don't know when to quit. Huge mistake. And this is why. Here's what a lot of people build. Okay, this is a pretty realistic back test, but the red line, they go live trading, and then it does this. And then they end up like this. Right? And, you know, you might chuckle a little bit, but the fact is, that's what happens a lot of times. So, when do you quit? You know, do you trade it in the first place? Or do you quit here, or do you ride it all the way down to the bottom? There is no answer, except you got a plan for it. And I'm not going to tell you there's a best way to do it. Part of the reason I can't tell you why, because I think you need a lot of failed systems to look at. Now, if you have enough failed systems of your own, go back and look at when you should have quit. And maybe you'll be able to get some ideas on that. Personally, I've had ones that have failed, without a doubt, but I don't think I have enough to say, oh, hey, use this times the drawdown, or use some kind of statistical process control, or use some other method. So the big thing, I think, is you come up with a method, something reasonable. What's reasonable? Well, if you have an historical drawdown based on your 10-year back test, and all of a sudden you get a drawdown worse than that, or worse than 1.5 times it, or whatever, that might be a good time to reevaluate and say, I'm going to quit trading this. You know, you don't want to take it down until it's 10 times your worst max drawdown, right? Because by then your account's probably wasted. So you got to be realistic about it, and it's going to be a different answer for everybody, probably. But you want to write it down. That's the key. Do it before you start trading, too. You write it down, and then you share it with your trading partner, your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever, you know, husband, whatever. You share it. Let them know, and especially if they're kind of monitoring your trading, that's a great way to do it, because then they can come to you once a week, once a month, and say, hey, Jim, here's your strategy. You said you were going to quit if this happened. Has this happened yet? You know, imagine how embarrassed you're going to be when you say, yeah, it happened and I'm still trading it. Helps make you accountable. Helps you with that last point, following the plan. You come up with a plan, and then you stick to it. Tell you what, you're going to sleep a lot better. You know, it doesn't mean you're not going to have systems that don't fail, and that's regardless of the type of trading you do. But you're going to be able to follow what you're doing a lot better, and you're going to feel more comfortable about it. Here's what I do, just as an example. Now, I use some different criteria for different systems, but the green dashed line is what I expect from my performance. The blue line is actually my actual month performance. This is all live. This is a system I've been trading for about 6 years. And then the red line, it's kind of like a trailing stop, right? And it just ratchets up. And if my performance ever goes below it, I've told myself I'm going to stop trading it. So, and you can see there's times where it comes close and then it comes back. This one might have a bigger threshold only because it's had so many years of good performance that, you know, this is a pretty loose, you know, this is a pretty high amount of loss that I'd have to incur before it hit that quitting point. But I'm willing to do that based on its past performance. Now, is this right for you? I don't know. And that's not the point. The point is I have something, and if it occurs, I check it, and I'll say, hey, I'm going to quit. So, those are 6 big mistakes, huge mistakes. I can't tell you how many times I personally used those until I figured out a process of my own. You know, that's mistake number 1. I didn't have a process. Now I do. Number 2, I thought I had to reach the world with these ideas. You don't. 3 is over-optimizing. 4 is knowing what is a good strategy and knowing what's acceptable to you So what a good strategy for me probably is not going to be a good strategy to you. Could be different things. Keep that in mind. Using metrics, you know, your metrics should support all those other points. You know, they should help tell you what a good strategy is. And then the rest of the metrics, ignore them. You'll save a lot of time by ignoring certain metrics and not getting too hung up on them. I mean, I've seen people get way hung up. You don't want to do that. And then the last one's not knowing when to quit. Quit a strategy. Quit your trading. We talked about just the strategy part, but make sure you know when you're going to quit each strategy you trade. And that's pretty much it.